Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Mallory O'Meara, and she's here today to share with us her new book, The Lady from the Black Lagoon. Now, Mallory is an author, screenwriter, and film producer. Every week she co-hosts the literary podcast, Reading Glasses. Whether it's for the screen or the page, Mallory seeks creative projects imbued with the weird, horror, and the monsters of her passion. So let's welcome to the show, Mallory O'Meara.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a pleasure it is to have you here. And my goodness, I loved your book. Absolutely loved it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
thank you.
And you could tell it's just, you put so much of your heart in it, researching it and really uncovering, all this information. And so I have to ask you, what started you down this path?
Of writing the book? Well, Millicent Patrick has been my hero since I was a teenager when I first saw Creature from the Black Lagoon. And no one really knew anything about her. And I always wanted to know more about her story. And this project really originated from my own curiosity. I just wanted to know what happened to her.
So when you started researching her, where was the first place that you started to look for information on Millicent?
So the only thing I really knew about her for a fact was that she worked on Creature from the Black Lagoon and that she designed the monster. And so that's where I started. And I had to sort of work both backwards and forwards because that was the middle part of her life. But it was really the only sticking point I had that I knew for sure, and I could find hard evidence of things that she did. So I started doing monster research and working on trying to find other monster movies she worked on and what she was doing in her personal life while she was doing all of those things for Universal. And that was really my starting block.
Well, and it's interesting as, people do research, especially with an author, with an artist like this. It's really tough to find information sometimes because we're talking about the age before computers. So not all the information is just right at your fingertips. Did it take you a while to develop all this?
It took me a very long time, and all of my spare time, and all of my savings as well. I had to do a whole year's worth of research before I had enough material to even know that I could write a book, let alone could finish writing it. Millicent Patrick lived in a time before Facebook, before the internet. So I really had to go into tons of different kinds of archives and libraries and talk to historians and really do a lot of detective work and find, hard pieces of evidence on her life instead of, digital files.
Well, I understand she had a lot of pseudonyms, and
yes.
How many?
So Millicent Patrick went under 7 different names over the course of her life, which made researching her quite a nightmare. By the end of the project, when I would go to different archives or registries or anywhere, it felt like I was rolling out this big scroll of names that this poor clerk would have to help me enter every single different one of them to see if I could find any information under any of the names or any of the combination of the names.
Well, and that must have been just such a journey going through all that, finding, and I understand even her birth certificate was a little difficult to find.
Yes, even her birth certificate was misspelled on the birth certificate. Her middle name, which is Fulvia, or one of her middle names, she had a few, was misspelled. So it was very difficult to find it in any government registry because it was under the misspelling. And it was, tracking Millicent Patrick down was just, it was a feat.
Obviously a labor of love, being able to find that. And it's interesting because I hear kind of the genesis of the book started from a tattoo.
Yes. So the whole thing started where she's been my hero for a long time, and I decided to get a tattoo of a portrait of her on my left arm, which I'm a heavily tattooed person. I have a lot of tattoos of things that I love, and it just made sense to have her there because she's been my hero for so long. I work in monster movies 65 years after she did, so I work in the same industry, and she's been a talisman to me my entire career. So having her with me was going to be, I imagined it as being a big comfort, and it was going to be very special. And it was, but it also led to me having a conversation with a person who is now my literary agent saying, wow, who is this woman on your arm? why do you have this tattoo? And as I was explaining it to him and how no one really knew anything about her, he said, that would make a great book. You should write that book. And it led me down this wild path that led me here today.
Well, I'm so glad that conversation happened and you have this book because it really it's bringing to light, one of the unsung heroes when we look in Hollywood and the creative side of somebody who really kind of went, she was kind of thrown aside a few times and really went unknown.
Yes. I mean, Millicent Patrick, there should be a statue of her in Hollywood somewhere. She truly, truly was a feminist trailblazer in the worlds of both art and film. She did so much, and her influence is still being felt today. And it's heartbreaking that it wasn't until now that anyone knew who she was.
So, what do you think, for those who are in film or makeup or female artists, what they can learn from Millicent?
Well, the cool thing about Millicent Patrick is that she's living proof. Right now we live in this age of Me Too, which is wonderful, and there's this big push to get more women in every industry, more women in front of the camera, behind the camera, more women artists and writers. But what I want people to understand is that it's not that women just now want to do these things. We've always wanted to do these things. We've always been there. Women have always wanted to make comic books and movies and art and books. It's only recently that we've gotten the chance to. And Millicent proves that because she was doing it in the 1950s. She was the first one to ever design a big classic movie monster. And if what happened to Millicent Patrick hadn't happened, we would probably have a lot more women who had done it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because of her, she's extremely beautiful. And I think that when people look at her exterior, they're like, oh, well, she's too pretty to be doing this. And they kind of wrote her off a lot.
Yes, they would look at her, and to them, she was such an anomaly because they couldn't believe that such a beautiful woman was interested in making art and especially making monsters. And now, for the past 65 years, a lot of people wrote her off as not, as they couldn't believe that she had done this because they're like, oh, well, she's just a beautiful woman. She must have been somebody's girlfriend. There's no way that she belonged in this space.
I understand you're still getting pushback from people that are saying that. It just
Yeah.
makes absolutely zero sense that you can't be pretty and also have a brain and inspiration and be creative. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
It's so silly. And I shouldn't have been surprised, but I still was. I mean, this book might have been the first book in the history of the world that started getting hate mail before it was published. A lot of these older male historians just flat out refused to believe that she did these things. Like you said, because she was pretty, because they just assumed that it was a mistake for her to be on set, or she was, just someone's wife, or, they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that women can do both, that women can do everything.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to just be pretty and sit there. That's just kind
Yes.
of ridiculous. You know?
Yes.
But I'm so glad that you share that part of the story because it does show a lot of the gender bias that's was happening then, is still happening in many ways. Obviously, by the mail that you're getting, and I think it opens discussion on what women are really capable of.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it's all been worth it because I get much more than the hate mail. Is I get so much feedback from women who feel so seen having read this book, and think, gosh, I finally feel like I belong here. I feel like I can do these things. I feel like, the story is making me feel like I can do whatever I want, and that's what makes it all worth it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love how in your book, you share about, her work. Well, not really work, but being at Hearst Castle as a young girl.
Yeah, so Millicent Patrick grew up on William Randolph Hearst's summer estate. And by summer estate, I mean massive, opulent mansion, complete with a whole entire town to support the running of it. So William Randolph Hearst was America's first media mogul, and Millicent Patrick's father worked for him as the superintendent of construction for this home. And it was this incredible, over-the-top, grandiose place. Winston Churchill would visit, Charlie Chaplin would visit, all these big celebrities and politicians. And that's really where Millicent grew up for the first 10 years of her life. It was an incredible experience. It was very it was very formative for her. And where else could she go after that but Hollywood?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Hearst Castle is just such a beautiful place. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, even the pool is like gold, So you you look at that and you're like, wow, okay, it's Hollywood next.
Yes, absolutely. Because a big thing for Millicent when she was growing up there is that what listeners have to remember is that she grew up there, but her father worked there. It She got to hang out there, but it wasn't for her. There were constant reminders that they were the staff. So for Millicent, that was something that she always aspired to, is having her own place like that, and it was very formative because that's what she always strove for. And again, where else could she find an atmosphere where you could meet celebrities and go to crazy parties and go to these beautiful homes? And Hollywood, California, there's literally no other place in the country that compares to it.
Well, and it's interesting because you also talk about Julia Morgan and just the sexism of that time. Just how yeah, there was like so much of it. And I think because women today are so used to having certain liberties and we're at such a place that it's hard to even imagine what it was like back then.
Yeah, so Julia Morgan was the architect for Hearst Castle. She was Millicent's father's boss. And she was this incredible architect. She was very, very influential. She designed almost 800 different buildings over the course of her life in California. But Millicent Patrick's father really did not like having to answer to her, and he made it very, very difficult for her. And eventually, that's why she couldn't take it anymore, and that's why he was fired. And that experience was very influential on Millicent because it set the bar. Like, that's how men deal with women.
When you grow up in a certain era where you're expected to be quiet and men are right. I mean, it wasn't even until the 1970s when women were allowed, to get credit cards without their husbands. So you look at these things and just how far things have changed from then to here. And it does set the stage a lot for her work environment and what's kind of expected of her, because they kind of paraded her around as the pretty person, and she went on tour for Westmore.
Yes. So Millicent Patrick's boss at the Universal Monster Shop in the 50s was a man named Bud Westmore. And the reason why nobody knows who Millicent Patrick is because when she was on this press tour to promote Creature from the Black Lagoon, and not even to promote her work, she was told that she got to go and promote the movie, but she had to lie and tell people that she didn't design it. She had to give the credit to Bud. But he was still so, so jealous of her, and ended up firing her, and she never, never worked behind the scenes in Hollywood ever again. And so many people ask me, well, why didn't she do anything? Why didn't she fight back? But back then, that's what could she have done? There was no Twitter, there was no internet where she could have, called for some backlash or called him out. But also, that's just how things were done. You didn't talk back to a man. You didn't, especially if he was your boss. That's just how things were.
Yeah. And really she was blacklisted then. So I mean you look at it, and if you're not working for the Westmores, you're not working for anybody.
Yes, so the Westmores were a huge makeup dynasty in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and because Bud Westmore's father was a man named George Westmore, and he quite literally invented the idea of a makeup department in the 1920s. He was like the Steve Jobs of beauty makeup in Hollywood. And all of George's sons, his 5 sons, all went into makeup. And there was a period of time where each one of them was running the makeup department at a major studio, whether it was Paramount, Warner Brothers, Universal. So if you were out with the Westmores at that time, you were really up a creek.
So when we look at this, what do you feel like this part of history tells women today in regards to like having women in film and just being involved in that?
It's amazing to me because it just shows, like I said before, that we can do anything, and that women have always wanted to do these things, and we belong there. It's so crazy to me that Millicent was working in the 50s. No one followed in her footsteps for another 30 years. So we're still catching up. We back in the 50s there weren't a lot of female directors, but we just went through another Oscar season where not a single female director was nominated in the best director category. It's crazy. So we feel like we've progressed a lot, but when you look at the numbers, we haven't gotten that far.
Yeah, there's still a long way for us to go.
very long way.
Well, it's good that we have people like you and the lady from the Black Lagoon, your book out there, because it is starting that discussion where people are like, you know what, sexism is still alive and well today. We need to kind of look at what's kind of keeping women back.
Yes, and it's important to, I think, to tell these stories to see, for men to see what it's like, and for people to see that it's so ubiquitous, it's in every industry, and the effects that it has. It seems like, a small area of the world is like monster movies, but and I mean, it's a place that has a lot of effect on our culture, has a lot of effect on art, it has a lot of effect on people, and it's the cumulative effect of the sexism in all these different parts of the world, creates the world that we live in today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been told that it's a $1 billion business, that monster movie, horror movie kind of thing. And you look at it and you can see that it really does have impact. Because, I mean, I remember watching, The Creature from the Black Lagoon and being scared and excited and checking it out. And it's interesting to think someone that is so talented, she was able to create these things and bring them to life.
Oh, yeah, she was incredible. She was. We wouldn't have so many things without her work. Creature from the Black Lagoon, even though it's never been remade or rebooted, is such an influential piece of art. We wouldn't have Shape of Water without it. It's such an iconic design. It's so easily recognizable. Again, even though it's the only classic Universal monster franchise that never get a remake or a sequel, or a modern day sequel or a reboot in any way. And horror movies influence so many of our own cultural narratives about villains and about monsters, and how we deal with monsters, and how we look at women who are victimized by monsters. So it seems like, a cheesy, fun, silly part of the cinema world, but it really is important to our cultural narrative.
Yeah, it really starts the discussion and continues the discussion on, just the strength that women have. Because a lot of times you see it's the girl that gets taken away or what have you, but there's so much more that goes on to these type of stories.
Absolutely. And I truly feel that if we had more women behind the camera, more women like Millicent designing the monsters or directing it or editing it and writing about women fighting monsters instead of being carried away by them,
Mm.
we would be able to getting to tell these stories and getting to watch these stories is extremely powerful, and it changes people's perception of both themselves and the way that they deal with the situations that they find themselves in the world.
Yeah, and there's not expectation that women have to be saved, because when we have women at the table that are developing these, maybe that's the guy that needs to be saved.
Yes. And it was like we had this great cultural moment when we all got to see Mad Max Fury Road, and we all got to see Furiosa be this incredible hero that she was, and that was really groundbreaking for a lot of women. And because for women, we're the ones who have to deal with the monsters in real life. Men get to walk out of, at least white straight men get to walk out of a movie theater and walk home and whistle and not think about it again. But women truly have to worry about stuff like that. Somebody might be following us home from the movie theater. It's a true, real fear that we all experience every day. So we should be the ones telling the stories about how to fight the monsters.
I think it was really appropriate for Millicent to be the one who's creating, the creature from the Black Lagoon, because I'm pretty sure she's surrounded by them.
Yes, absolutely. She not only was in a cocoon of obscurity after what happened with Bud Westmore, but she was living in it while she was working at Universal.
Mm, mm-mm. Well, I understand, and the story's, of course, not in order. We want everyone to go pick up their own copy of The Lady from the Black Lagoon, but she also worked at Disney too.
Yes, so Millicent would have been worth writing a book about even if she'd only designed Creature from the Black Lagoon. But her life was so, so much more than that. I keep calling her the Forrest Gump of the 1950s because she interacted with so many different professions and so many big personalities. And she was one of the first female animators at Disney. She worked on some really, really big and influential movies that everyone has seen. And she really made her mark on the world of art in that way.
Wow. What are some of the lesser known things that she worked on?
Movie wise,
Sure.
because she worked Millicent truly was a Renaissance woman. Well, a lot of people might not realize that she also designed the monster for Universal's very, very first science fiction film called It Came from Outer Space, which really it's in the American Film Institute's most list of most important science fiction films. The treatment for the original film was written by Ray Bradbury, so it's really an important work of film, and it was Universal's very first foray into the world of science fiction, and it was Millicent's first monster that she ever designed for live action, and it's still kind of a cheesy monster, but it's a very, very important film.
Well, especially back then. I mean, because, creativity was just blossoming in those areas, because people didn't have that before.
Yeah, science fiction was a very new thing back then. We were going from horror that was afraid of the old world and ghosts and more supernatural things to us being afraid of nuclear war and the Cold War and aliens and the sky. So it was a very, very interesting changeover in the world of monsters, and Millicent helped lead that charge.
I just know going through and doing the research on Millicent, there was probably so much that surprised you at every turn. Was there something that really stood out for you?
Oh gosh, so much. I was just so stunned by so much of it. And, she had very, very tumultuous relationships, which was very surprising. Because the thing about Millicent Patrick is it's not just her career that was interesting. Her as a person was very interesting. So she had, in her romantic life, she had a lot of big relationships that were, and some of them ended in tragedy that were just so bombastic and over the top. I couldn't make it. As I was researching, I was just like, I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried.
Mhm.
She had a very tumultuous relationship with her family. She was friends with a lot of big personalities and celebrities. So her incredible over the top career was matched only by her incredible over the top personal life.
Well, that would probably be appropriate considering, she brought so much and such creativity and just so much to the table that when you look at her background, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that she had an over the top life.
Yes, everything about Millicent Patrick was larger than life. Her personality, her work, her relationships, even the way that she spoke, she would speak in sort of this affected Hollywood-esque, darling accent. She loved everything over the top. Millicent loved it.
Well, and I understand that you even got to hear an audio of her speaking.
Yes. One of the great research finds was at Castle. They had a recording from the 80s of Millicent Patrick talking to them, the historians there, about her childhood. So it was the very first time I got, because she was also an actress, so I heard her voice before in some of the films and TV shows that she had been in. But it's a very different experience when you get to hear someone in conversation in sort of private, personal setting, and getting to hear her tell the story of her childhood in her own words was absolutely incredible.
That must have been just absolutely for you as the author, just kind of coming full circle with this story, because there's so much there that through discovery and then being able to actually hear her must have been just amazing.
Yes, it really truly was. I mean, tracking Millicent Patrick down was very difficult. It was sort of like, I was reverse engineering a life. So when I got to have big research breakthroughs like that, where I got to see her truly as a person, and even just from a practical standpoint, getting to hear things about her in her own words instead of secondhand or third hand was indispensable for me.
Hmm. What do you want readers to take away from your book?
Besides the fact that I want readers to know that women belong in every industry, and we're needed there. I want them to know that women can do anything. These stories, there's so many of them. You scratch the surface of any industry, and there's so many women everywhere that are doing big, great things that have been so influential and have touched the world that we see every day and the culture that we live in and the society that we live in. And we've been operating for so many years under this, the default setting is the guy's perspective, and we look at everything from a guy's world, but there's that erases so many great stories, so many women, so many tales that are like very, very important and fascinating and will really change the way you look at things. And I want, people to put Millicent in that category. I want them to realize, how important she was and that she belongs in this incredible pantheon of artist women.
Do you feel it's also a wake-up call for Hollywood that they need to really take a look at just, some of the gender bias that still is going on today?
Yes, I think right now it's easy to think, oh well, Me Too happened, so everything's different and everything's changed. But it's not that simple. It really isn't. Things that we haven't seen as much change as we really need to. And I want people to wake up and see that not only is this stuff happening, but not to despair. That there are ways to combat it, and one of the best ways is to just be aware of it and to look at situations. Especially if you're a guy, and think, well, what would the situation be like if I was a woman? And there's little changes that we can all make that'll make such a huge difference to the world that we live in.
Yeah, such a big impact. Well, where can our listeners connect with you, Mallory, and learn more, not just about your book, but the work you do?
MalloryOmera.com, that's OMEARA, is a great place to start. It's my website. You can find information about the podcast that I do every week called Reading Glasses there. And my other writing, my film work, I spend way too much time on social media, so you can find me at Mallory O'Mara on both Instagram and Twitter. And that's a great place to start with me.
Well, Mallory, my goodness, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today and to share your book with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time talking with you.
Thank you so much, Mallory. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, The Lady from the Black Lagoon. The Lady from the Black Lagoon is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. If you'd like to connect with Mallory, you can at her website, MalloryOmera.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.